Hey everybody, today I just wanted to do a bit of an overview, somewhat of a long-term update on how the Shirogorov Neon Ultralite has been treating me. Had this probably a month or two at this point. Didn't immediately grab me with the, just as I got it in hand, but I've come to like a lot more in a lot of ways. So a few things starting off. Here's the packaging. Came with just the cloth, certificate of authenticity and everything. Fairly plain, a little bit lackluster on that, but whatever, it's sufficient. And then just a quick size comparison. I'll bring out the usual Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight. This is a 3-inch blade versus 3 1/4 on this one. I'll talk about that in just a minute, which is kind of why I went for this model. So based on what I've seen, basically the Neon from Shirogorov comes in a few variants. The Neon Light, the Neon Zero, the Ultralight, and now the Neon NL are the main ones that I've seen. My understanding is that the Ultralight is the shortest of them, coming in at a 3 1/4 inch blade. Most of the others are in the 3.3 to 3.4 range, which is part of what I wanted. I liked the having something as small as possible. Out of the Shirogorov line, most of their stuff is quite a bit bigger and I don't know, a little bit more full size and everything. But it's also quite light. My understanding is the big difference between this and the regular Neon Light is the lack of a backspacer here. And it also is an LMAX blade instead of M390, I believe, on that one. The Neon NL, I believe, has micarta. They've put out a few different micarta inlays, and I think G10 and things like that instead of the milling on the titanium scales. And yeah, I think that's about it. It does have multi-row free bearings, basically. That's one of the things I don't like is I've been afraid to kind of take this thing apart because of the free bearings. But my understanding is that basically instead of a ring around the pivot with captive bearings, it's got more or less a set of 5 little triangular cutouts on each side that each hold 3 bearings for a total of 15. That's one thing I feel like there's a lot of different perspectives on is the importance of bearings in action and everything. I'm really sort of the thought that it's not all that important in the grand scheme of things when it comes to action as compared to the amount of work and precision put into the detent and the way that the ball interfaces with the blade as it closes, as well as sort of the lock bar tension and that sort of thing. But this is a case where I do feel like there's some sort of feeling to it that I can't quite put my finger on. I've had others where I've tried, swapping out with the multi-row skiff captive bearings versus more of a standard type thing. I don't really notice anything. But with this, it is a little different. It drops close shut in a way that's not, guillotine-like. It's just very controlled. And the stupid thing it kind of reminds me of is if you've ever been in a supermarket or something that has like the rollers as you're checking out and you can kind of shove something along and have it roll along. This is kind of what that feels like to me because it takes a little bit of encouragement, but it's not like a, shake it and it moves, shake it and it moves. It's more like, get it going, it goes, it's smooth and just controlled and frictionless, which is kind of interesting. On the deployment, it's definitely one of those that you cannot fail a flip on, as far as I can tell. Very light switchy, just based on the geometry of the relatively small flipper tab back here. But you pull it, it flips. It's not the kind of flipping action that makes, would fool someone into thinking it's assisted or something like that. I feel like there's some that are. Because I do believe this is just a traditional hemispherical ball detent system in here, but it's good in that regard. Another thing I really do appreciate is the thinness of the handle and the scales. When you look at it, it basically feels like the blade stock as well as each scale is roughly the same in terms of thickness, so it's very it's got a profile that I like in pocket, and it works just fine in my hand. Um, I like that, you know, wider in this dimension, skinnier in this dimension type feeling. The blade is, I believe, 3.5 millimeters, which is about 13 and a half, or, you know, 135 thousandths ish, I believe. You know, it's a full flat grind, so no issues there. Yeah, that's the main things. When I got this, it didn't come all that sharp, so I did have to put my own edge on it. Did put on a pretty acute 17-degree sharpening angle, so great at cutting, especially with a full flat grind, and not too big of a deal, especially with the LMAX. Works great, and I do carry it. One thing I do like is the clip. It's got hidden hardware. I had heard some issues with, I think on the Neon Light, people said either too much tension or not enough clearance to get in. It's not perfect, but the way that they've got the clip designed, I don't have an issue with it attaching and pretty much having the right amount of tension on, you know, a pair of jeans or something like that. There's maybe would like to see a little bit more clearance, but it's basically been fine. So how this kind of stacks up with some other flippers, you know, frame lock, liner lock type things. I think the biggest close comparison I would make would just be with the ZT450. This being Shirogorov is designed by the Russian Shirogorov brothers. This is a Belarusian, Dmitry Sinkovich, designing this. And this one was really my introduction to the world of flipper frame locks. And in a way, you know, it's surprised me in a lot of ways at how well it holds up, just in terms from an action standpoint. You know, the 450 is one that's, I don't find myself grabbing all that often, but when I do, I'm reminded that, yeah, it does still hold up pretty well. So you can kind of see, you know, in both cases, they've got the curve going on, somewhat similar design language, just a huge difference in sort of the price points that you're looking at, as well as the overall fit and finish, certain things with the more interesting milling done on the handle scales here, as well as the fancier kind of stone washing that they do, even though it's very matte, kind of gray amorphous overall. And certainly a much simpler clip design on this guy, much simpler bearings, and where you really do notice that is on the closing. This one's not bad by any stretch, but it doesn't have the same feeling of, I don't know, just something impressive like the Shiro does. Another one, certainly for comparison's sake, when we're talking about higher end actions, is the North Arm Skaha 2. This has the much more distinctive kind of flattened ball kind of detent system with this liner lock. It's a much more clicky and mechanical kind of opening action that you get with it. And as a result of that liner lock and that detent design and how much effort they put into that, this really is finger guillotine-like in that close, which is especially impressive considering the thinness of the stock on that. Comparing that, you know, again, it's both just very good actions in a just different way, even though this is kind of its own thing. But it also does kind of go to show for me how the bearings don't make as much difference as the design and the amount of effort put into the detent system, at least in my experience so far. And then lastly, this one's very different, but another one with an interesting detent, the Micro Evo Typhoon from Sharpa Design and Rayot. This again has a different detent design. It's kind of like ramps or something, don't quite get it, but it's got that much clickier, more authoritative type deployment. And even though it doesn't have, it's got thicker stock than I would realize just holding it, but it is a very light blade, which makes it really not want to shut all that freely without some encouragement. But yeah, these are all kinds of ones I would hold up as examples of, you know, excellent flipping kind of action, basically. So overall, you know, I do like this as a collector piece, and as just a useful kind of everyday carry type thing. It carries well, it cuts well. It's good to keep in your pocket as conversation piece, whatever. It feels luxurious while also being functional. And really, the biggest downsides is just the amount of finickiness, both of the bearing system as well as some of the hardware choices. The fact that this is a free spinning, non-tooled pivot is really the biggest sin in the design of this. Because it is so finicky with the pivot tension on how much that can affect the closing, that you always find myself, often after a while just having to tweak this one way, that way, a little way, this way a lot of the time. And because it's free spinning and not tooled, it makes it a little scary to even consider trying to put any Loctite on that. In some ways it feels like, it's a high-end knife with a lot of finicky innards that in some ways makes it feel like, what I'd imagine owner of a Lamborghini or something would feel like, where all kinds of things to go wrong with it, and just tricky to deal with as a result when it does. Yeah. So anyway, I've certainly heard about things in this kind of areas. Competition would be like the Brad Southard Mini Tolk, which is supposedly tough to get your hands on. It's more of a custom piece. I don't know. I might be interested if I found one, but this is kind of about as rich as for my blood as I want for something this kind of area is a flipper like this. It is fun to play with. It's a nice piece. Not the fanciest, showiest thing, but it's kind of the thing where if you know, and you got to respect it. Great craftsmanship and whatnot. I'm glad to have it in my collection. But really, if there was anything I was going to say off this, you could be very happy just with a ZT450 instead of getting something like this guy. Similar performance in a lot of ways, just doesn't have the same kind of collector appeal in a lot of ways. So yeah, hope this is interesting. Have a good one.